So we're delighted to welcome him this evening, Your Honor.
Thank you, Kerry, for that very nice introduction. As Kerry was saying, 1,200 judicial opinions, Bernie Nussbaum, who was sitting behind me, said, and think of how many reversals. So, so I am very honored that the City Bar Justice Center has asked me to speak for a very few minutes here. I'm honored because of the truly awe-inspiring work that the recipients of this year's awards have done, and you'll hear a lot more about that later. But I'm also very honored because these awards pay homage to Jeremy Epstein, a fantastic lawyer who it was my privilege to know for more than 35 years. And I'd just like to take a minute or two to talk a little bit about Jeremy. The first time I met Jeremy, it was illustrative of the kind of person he was. I was a young prosecutor trying a case before Judge Arnold Bauman, who Jeremy was clerking for. Judge Bauman was busy beating up on me unmercifully. It wasn't until many years later that I realized that was the natural role of a federal judge. But I was, at the time, mortified and had my head down. And when I lifted my eyes just a little, I saw Jeremy, who was sitting below Judge Bauman. And he gave me a look that I can only describe as one of tremendous sympathy. Now, you have to understand that law clerks, and I speak here from personal experience, relish having their judges beat up on lawyers. This shows their lack of foresight. But Jeremy wasn't that kind of guy. He had empathy for everyone, even a dumb young assistant United States attorney like me. And I was immediately taken to him and grateful to him for expressing that sign of sympathy. A year later, Jeremy was my colleague in the U.S. Attorney's Office, and he, by his brilliance and by his great talents, quickly distinguished himself, was soon trying some of the most important cases in the office. But even there, he was a different breed of gentleman. When most of us want a trial, by the way, for the younger lawyers, I'll explain later what a trial is, but it used to exist. After a trial, criminal trial, most of us, deep in our hearts, thought, boy, it's great, we've convicted this bad guy, and we hope he rots in hell. But Jeremy, and this was true in several conversations I had with him, even when he convicted, and he almost always convicted those he went after, would say to me things like, you know, there's redeeming qualities in this guy, or, you know, he was the product of a very hard upbringing, or other things that showed, frankly, a breadth and empathy and a maturity that virtually none of the rest of us had. And once again, I was struck by how distinctive a person Jeremy Epstein was. Well, a few years later, he became a partner at Sherman & Sterling, and it was there that he undertook the tremendous pro bono efforts that have led to these awards being named for him. Countless hours, both in high-level positions, such as in the Legal Aid Society, but also, and usually more often, in the nitty-gritty of actual litigations. And I should say a word here of respect to his law firm, which supported him throughout these decades of very intensive pro bono activity, I think because of their recognition that such activity is what we expect of someone who bears that great title, a member of the New York Bar. It helped, however, that he was also a good business getter, and in no time at all, he had also developed a reputation as a great commercial litigator, as an author of many learned articles. I don't know where he found time to father the two great kids he fathered, but I guess the fathering doesn't take that long. But in fact, he was a terrific father to his children who are here today, along with his wonderful wife, Amy. They have always been among the strongest supporters of this ceremony. From my many lunches with Jeremy, I think he most enjoyed the criminal cases he was involved in, and I only have time to just mention one, but it was perhaps the best of all, and that was his representation of Ted Herring. Mr. Herring was convicted of murdering a store clerk in Florida. He was only 19 at the time, and he was suffering and continued to suffer from substantial mental deficits. He had an IQ of at most 75, but that did not stop the legal system of Florida from imposing the death penalty upon him. Jeremy undertook to see to it that he was not executed and represented him more or less continuously for 25 years. Jeremy argued 6 cases for Mr. Herring in the Florida Supreme Court. He argued innumerable motions in the lower courts. And there is some sad ironies to this case because just before Jeremy died, he filed the most successful motion, and after he died, the Florida Circuit Court vacated the death penalty, but in a further sad irony, the Florida Supreme Court then reversed that decision. But even today, thanks to the people that Jeremy trained and the wonderful lawyers at Sherman and Sterling who have continued that representation, Mr. Herring is still alive. Now, why does someone like Jeremy Epstein undertake that kind of representation? This was not a case of an innocent man who needed to be exonerated. Mr. Herring was guilty. But the steamroller that so often passes for justice, criminal justice in this country, had steamrolled over all his rights, had steamrolled over all his best arguments, and Jeremy realized that he had not been accorded equal justice under the law. And I think, when I think back to Jeremy, and I do quite a lot, because he was a very talented fella, and he was not a guy who was outwardly emotional. He was very friendly. We used to have lunch together, and he mainly wanted to discuss, because he had been a classics major, the poetry of Ovid and Catullus. Those of you who know anything about Catullus will know why it was a fun conversation. But beneath that exterior, behind those sort of horn-room glasses that I remember so well, Jeremy had a deep, deep passion to see that the promise of equal justice for all was truly the law of this land. And he, in every one of the representations he undertook, and there were so many, that was his aim. And I think that when we consider why we're all here today, I hope it's because we too share that passion. We too can only admire and hope in our small ways to emulate a man like Jeremy Epstein. Thank you very much.